really, a lot of my time would be spent with the script, and then just sort of, repetition of what the story. I was, when I started out acting, very obsessed with this sort of, the method or Stanislavski approach. And now I kind of just have a sort of pick and mix of my own versions of that. I mean, I definitely wouldn't be method. Like, I like stepping in and out. So to sort of be in character and then step out of it and go back in, I find that keeps me fresh and also somewhat sane. And so what was great about this experience was, I kind of, just gave myself up to the way that Terry shoots. Because obviously there was no preparation with the script. It was just about, I guess the main thing with Terry that one would have to sort of keep in mind as an actor is that you have to be prepared to fall on your face over and over again all day. And to be fine with that, to be uninhibited. That's what I think is so impressive about Val Kilmer. He's very uninhibited as a performer. Not, to be not self-conscious, to be making a fool of yourself in front of a whole crew, and whoever else, of the public is there when we're shooting on location. That's the thing, really, to just be brave and go for it. And,
and if a director and a crew can set that environment, that it's okay. Yeah, it's like we're all family here. Just
Michael was always completely brave too. No, I wouldn't say falling on his face. He would always, we would just say attack, and he was completely fearless about giving himself. He wasn't. You never felt he was trying to create a certain impression or of himself or do anything to look or appear a certain way or make himself admired or he would just give himself completely, and very it's such an inspiration to work with an actor like Michael, because you try to keep up with him, and not that we did completely.
You've always had actors like that, even going back to the early. I don't think there's ever been a second of anyone like posing in a Terry Malick. You know what I mean?
That's right. Well, he would shout that out. He was like, "Don't do that, Michael. Looks like you're posing."
I mean, there's not even look at the reality of like Warren Oates or just Martin Sheen. Says, just all the actors over the year. There's this kind of unvarnished real to every one of them. So.
Richard Gere in Days of Heaven.
Yeah, he's just
such a great performance.
Yeah, just really kind of. Low to the ground. Okay, we'll try another slew of questions.
Michael, there's a brilliant scene where you're confronted for having portrayed your friend, and you really have to dig deep to bring out all your full-blown charm and irresistibleness. You even do a little tap dance. And I was wondering, that side of the character, which obviously throughout the film, but particularly there, were you inspired by people I don't know if inspired is the right word, were you thinking about people that are actually like that, maybe in the film industry or people or was it just something you were drawing on for the moment?
Okay, next question.
Hi, my question is for Michael. I think you're one of our best actors, versatile and dynamic and humble.
That's obvious.
You have worked with so many wonderful directors, Steve McQueen, Ridley Scott, Quentin Tarantino. Have you ever considered directing? And if so, what would you like to direct?
Okay, next question.
My question is kind of twofold, both for Michael and for Terrence. Being in the moment, chasing an impulse, finding something that connects, something truly organic, and you're in this moment, and then as an actor feeling like, oh man, really got that, and then hearing the director say like, okay, no, that was posing, that was fake. How did you, what was your technique for sort of discarding and moving forward with something fresh? And then for Mr. Malick, how do you personally handle actors? What's sort of your technique for saying like, I cherished this thing that you did, but it wasn't quite what we needed? So sort of a twofold thing there.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I asked it kind of the first question, but from the very beginning, how much, direction's kind of a lame word, but how much specifics do you think is your character how's it shaped by you, your conception of the character, the ongoing discovery of the character, what you're getting from Terry constantly, or?
Yeah, it's directing such, and you know, both you guys are masters at it, and it's such an interesting thing to observe as an actor, because I guess you only really understand it when you're working with a bad director and you really see what it's like when the wheels fall off, because there's so much going on, and in terms of what Terry does, and with the really, you know, I've been so lucky to work with so many great directors, is that they set an environment, as you were saying, you know, a space where you can feel like you can fail in, and feel safe in, and giving you flavors as opposed to direct sort of commands or instructions, you know, provocation, and sometimes, you know, I found this a lot with directors. They're actually better actors than me. You know, I remember Terry would be like, you know, there's a magnificence to the character, and he stood in front of the lens, and I was looking, I was like, holy shit, that is magnificent. That's pretty amazing. And I think, you know, it's kind of, with an actor and a director, I guess it's kind of like a love affair. There's a chemistry there, and either the chemistry is there or it's not.
I feel like Terry knows exactly what he wants, and he's guiding you to that? Or
no, I feel like, in a way, he's sort of like, we don't know what we're going to find, let's find it together.
Okay.
But, you know, maybe he's much smarter than that and he sees it, but there's never, because I have worked with directors like that, that basically see it as it is and do their best to try and push
exactly
you.
Like.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
and
Terry,
I find that less interesting.
In that spectrum of exactitude for what you've pre-imagined and finding something you wouldn't have predicted, but you're setting an atmospheric canvas for.
Well, I find it very hard to, execute anything that is too preconceived, or storyboards. I've never been able to work from a storyboard or because it's hard. You always have a little bit of the feeling you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and I think you work that way, Rick. You let it
speak to
you where it will go
on the day,
and on the day, and you hope it will go someplace, and that you've allowed it to happen. But if you try to make things happen, they start to feel presented. They start to feel as though they the action had been premeditated and was now being presented to you, which starts to make it feel like theater, which is wonderful in its own right. But in the movies, you don't want the movies to be like theater.
And yet, every single detail of film production, from the history of film to the second, is geared toward rendering exact something that's preconceived months ago in a script and a thing. There's a lot of pressure typically for that blueprint to have it. So that's why I think it's remarkable, that you've created this form to fit, your language and your method to capture it is so unique. Because it's frustrating when, you have limited time and budget and actor schedules, and how to still be open to find, where your spirit is going. But watching Terry work, and I just, my limited exposure to it is really inspiring and really wonderful, because as much as like the art department, particularly in a period film, they're like, okay, well, we need to have everything perfect, but everyone's kind of scrambling. But Terry and the actors, that poetic process is happening, and it's a beautiful thing, very spontaneous, and Terry's very happy he seems like you're in your groove, but the apparatus is having to just keep that atmosphere working. So I just admire that you've able to find that methodology in the modern film world, because it's completely unique, to be able to do what you've done.
Absolutely, it's so unique. I was thinking, it's the most sort of rebel filmmaking I've ever been part of, for sure.
feel that too. Any questions before?
The
what?
directing, I would like to
Yes.
direct. What should I direct? Something contained. Yeah.
One room, 2 actors.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. I can't remember.
Michael will be a splendid director, I'm quite sure of that, so.
Some actors you work with, it's the questions they ask and the way they feel. You go, okay, that's it. Well, think about it. The history of film, the best job before directing is acting. It's what they don't really teach in film schools. They're not connected to drama departments or acting, but actors have the best. I think it's because you have a lot of work. You've worked with a lot of, between your theater work, all your film work, and the variety of, a smart actor has a huge palette of experience. And, okay, like you said, bad director, okay, I won't do that. It's like a player. I have a crappy coach. Okay, that didn't motivate me. That's hurting. So you really can put together if you're thinking that way. So it's no surprise that if you look at a lot of the top directors, just go down the list, so many have been actors or still are actors. It's the best entry position, I believe. So when are you going to make this movie?
Next year. No, I have no idea, but it's something that it's funny because it's starting off as an actor. Obviously, it's a very unpredictable career choice, and so I found that I was very focused for so many years. A lot of energy going into sort of just getting an opportunity to work. Yeah. And then sort of getting an opportunity to sort of, get a lead role. And so a lot of it sort of focused on a singular task.
Sure.
And since I've had the opportunity to work on so many great films with so many great collaborators and directors, I've started to enjoy more and more the collaborative process. We were talking a bit about that backstage. That's really something that I really marvel at now. The idea that you get this bunch of strangers together and they have to sort of gel and create, and that really is, I guess, the key to making a film is the casting, not just of what's in front of the camera, but what's behind the
crew
camera.
and everybody,
and the whole sort of mechanics of how films get made. I find that really, really fascinating, and I've enjoyed being sort of behind the monitor more and more as the years have gone by.
And can I say, just of all the Austin filmmakers, it strikes me, Terry's the only one who went to high school in Austin. So, just that popped in my head. Because there's talk, this is such an Austin movie. It's the ultimate Austin movie, and I think you're the ultimate Austin, like I said, a lot of us live here, but you go back, you've seen Austin change the most.
We have. It's so surprising. My wife and I were talking about when we came down. Even today, there were all these new buildings. This
you go,
this
wait,
hotel
where did that
across
come
the
from?
street we hadn't seen before.
I
We
know.
saw the ironworks were still there.
Your film's already a period film, I see a thing, it's like, oh, that's not there anymore.
That's true. That old the Alamo Draft House where that was. We shot around there, and that's completely gone.
Yeah, that's all something else.
So.
But it's magical to see it, and I love the contrast. Like, there's Enchanted Rock, there's these wonderful, I guess outside the trip to the Mexico section, which is wonderful, but it's just a great, visual ride, So. We'll try a few more questions. Let's do the...
First of all, Mr. Malick, congratulations. The movie was wonderful. It was worth the long line. I loved it. My question's for Michael. With all the fans you have around the world, because you're very, 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 very brilliant actor. And so with all the fans you have around the world, if you've ever inspired one to write something with you as a central character, like if they've never written, anything professionally, but you've inspired them to write it, would you be willing to read it?
Okay.
And if you are,
okay.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
Hi, I have a question for Mr. Malick. Whenever Michael was talking about acting and then you would be off to the side shooting a beetle, I just got a rush of images from your films that are seemingly spontaneous imagery or things that aren't necessarily conventional that you would expect to see in a film. And that is something that I I think kind of defines your films in my memory. So I guess my question would be, how do you know to trust your instincts or your impulses whenever you see those things or you have those inspirations and you know that you have to document in that moment?
Hi. As you said, the trip in Mexico is, to me, really interesting because, as you said at the beginning, there were lots of locations, and one, I think, is Yucatan, Mexico. And my question is, did you consider like Yucatan in the beginning of the script, or it was like Chivo has influence in a way, or I don't know, like, because to me there were some like scenes that were really interesting, like when the old lady was like around. So that's my question. Thank you.
Was that 3? Yeah. That's 3.
Can I?
So,
Hi.
Breaking the rules here.
Actually come from Poland, and I was in a big shock when I heard the most popular Polish prayer to Santa Maria, and I was like, am I hearing right? You know that the choir Zdrowaś Mario, and it was like, why? What was the purpose? I was really shocked.
All right.
Could you tell me why? Because it's really bothered me.
Well, that's its own panel. It'll be this Thursday. There'll be a 2-hour panel on music in this movie. But yeah, Terry. I mean, I think you have over 100 cues.
No, we do have a lot, and that cue was to show Michael's character suddenly haunted by the death of his wife, that in some way he was responsible for, and he was realizing that, and we didn't expect that anyone would understand the words. I can say that.
Yeah.
And so it was the suddenly waking up and feeling, waking up to a sense of his responsibility, and feeling agonized by that. And seeing himself just trapped in this glass box, alone, and so that piece of music felt right for that. And I think it was for that reason. We weren't thinking about the words so much as the feeling in the piece. And as for Mexico, we had always hoped we might go down there. We wanted to show the contrast of another place where there were brighter, life was more out in the open. It was kind of a simpler life that they all could feel that woke up something up in them, and so we just went down there to Yucatan for a few days to try and show that as something that a way of life that was freer, more colorful, more dramatic, and probably was partly due to the fact that we were working with so many Mexican collaborators, the cameraman, the AD, I can't remember the sound. I can't remember that they were all the assistant, the second assistant, I guess. I can't remember. There were quite a number of Mexicans. So it was a great pleasure to go down there. We had a great time. Michael, we were remembering last night because Michael, it was very rowdy.
Wow. So Terry, just let me ask, on the music front, that cue that she brought up, is that just something that was on your palette for years and you thought emotionally, or was it something music supervisor brings, or how would you say the music finds its way into this movie?
I think we just would have a certain number of cues or pieces that that we liked over the years that stay in a movie project. In in the project on the Avid, the editing machine, and so I think that we played that, and it seemed to play something in. It seemed to give a feeling of realization to Michael's character, to reinforce what he was doing
At that moment.
I see.
Yeah. There's a real, we're talking a lot of, these things, you talk about surface, but I'm most moved by the movie. I really think those issues of mortality and finding yourself, these people searching, that's what strikes me the most, I think. Those characters and the parent relationship, that's permeates the movie also in just little bits. I feel like this movie, everything you see is the tip of the iceberg, but there's so much underneath all of it. And I think that maybe grows out of your methodology. Like I was saying, when you see just a glimpse of a location or something short, that maybe it was a longer scene you shot, but I think that just adds a depth, whether it's a memory from these characters are experiencing, but it just adds to this kind of poetic memory feeling of where am I in the world? That these characters are experiencing.
I think we wanted to make it feel too like there were just bits and pieces of their lives that they didn't. It was like goes to that quotation that can you live in this world just moment to moment, song to song, kiss to kiss, as she says, mood to mood, and try to create these different moods for yourself and go through the world, as in that quote, without a self, just sort of an eager will living from one one desire to the next, and where does that lead, and what happens with that what happens to you in that sort of moment to moment, a life of moments, because in the story, Michael's character Hope, imagines there's nothing else but that, and that we're in free fall. He says we're nobody's home. It's all just chaos, rock and roll fragments. But it's a hard thing to convey, and we didn't know how. So doing lots of locations and lots of songs was our best guess about how to do that.
Well, I feel you've accomplished it. Just on that deep kind of poetic level of just pure. It's kind of a pure cinema in a way. It's just what you feel and how you process the world. One thing reminds you of something else, an interconnection, a separation, an alienation, a out of your body feel, a visceral feel. It's really hard to fit that into a typical dramatic structure. Cinema's unique that way. It can capture something that no other art form can, and so I appreciate you finding that. There were some questions before. No, anything?
I can't remember.
Okay. Do we have more?
Yes, right now I am. What? Oh, right, if somebody wrote a script. Yeah, my agent sitting right over
always,
there. I always sort of, I guess, the thing is to always be alive to new filmmakers, for sure. Always. Okay, excellent.
Scripts. The best scripts, they find their way. They percolate up. Okay, we have time for a few more questions, I think.
Hi, I hope you're having an amazing South by Southwest experience, and congratulations. Michael, I was wondering if you could touch on your working with your co-stars, because you and Rooney and all of Natalie, Ryan are in such a high caliber, and this kind of stream of consciousness way of filming. I was wondering if there's any magnetic experiences that have really stuck with you that are in the film, or didn't necessarily make the film, but they happened when you were shooting. And that could also go to Terry, because I'm sure you have different perceptions.
Okay, and one more question.
Hi, my question to Richard and Terrence is that what is your stance on how do you approach, or what is your opinion about superhero or comics-based movies like DC, Marvel, superhero movies? Because in my opinion, you represent diametrically the opposite of what they stand for, but I'm just interested in it.
Okay.
And to Michael, I would like to ask that, how do you approach these kind of superhero characters when so much is pre-written for you in the role? Thank you.
Okay, and last question here. And then
Yeah, hi. When the cast came on the stage at the Paramount beforehand, most of you talked about being allowed a level of freedom that you weren't sort of accustomed to. And I guess a question for Terrence, how do you communicate that to the actors in terms of showing that freedom? And to Michael, what are some of the better examples in the movie where you showed that freedom and cut loose? And I had one single question, which was the scene in the bar where the Ryan Gosling character breaks the beer bottle, and you sort of look a bit surprised and look at the camera. Was that one of those moments? But I'm just keen to know within the movie, what are some of the more interesting moments where you showed that freedom and improvisation, if you like? You know?
I like that Ryan's the only human in the world who doesn't know you're sleeping with his girlfriend. Well, in the known universe, who doesn't already pick that up. But, yeah, I was going to ask that question. What a wonderful, the only note would be, did you think about casting up this movie a little bit? No, yeah, it's a wonderful cast. How do you approach it, Terry? Are there just a lot of actors that you know their work and want to work with them? You run into them. How does it?
Well, yeah, so you just say, would you like to make a movie together, and try and find something that is interesting to all of you. And
did Michael's character pre-exist in your mind, or knowing
No,
Michael, did you kind of? Okay, yes. So there was this character
idea of
that
making a character like that who was sort of
yeah,
again,
sort of
laughing
lost
at the world, cynic who thought nothing really was real or to be taken seriously, did a lot of drugs.
And he's the successful guy. What does that say? Okay. He's the rich guy. You could be president someday. Okay. Okay. Sorry. We're talking about casting.
And I can't remember the other question. It was about whether it was a specific scene. Was it there was a specific?
Yeah,
scene?
who's asking you, Michael,
about working with the other actors? What stuck with me? I got to say, it really does sort of bring everything down to sort of, boils down to sort of one common denominator. You're just trying to survive altogether because, like you say, we're improvising so much, and the whole thing with improvisation is that it can just sort of go horribly wrong unless you're listening to one another and really kind of cooperating with one another. And luckily, we all found a rhythm with one another. The one thing that really sort of stood out for me was Val Kilmer. When I was sort of doing scenes with him, I was like, wow, it was so powerful, and like I say, he had just had this great sort of uninhibited quality to him. Uninhibited.
Yeah. And as far as the superhero movie thing, the only superhero I like is the one that he plays. No.
What, is the approach any different? It's just different in bigger films because really the only real difference is the amount of people and the time. So, if we were working on an independent film, you can end up shooting 20 pages of dialogue in a day. And, if you're working on a big film, that's 20 pages of dialogue in a month. It's really that kind of time difference. And it's about sort of pacing yourself accordingly. and keeping yourself sort of, you know, in a zone where you're not getting bored with the waiting around. But essentially, you know, the building blocks are the same. If I'm playing somebody who's in a comic book and, you know, in a fantastical situation, I've got to make a reality out of that for myself, and then hopefully it will translate for an audience.
I'm kind of jealous of actors. They get this through a career, such a wide variety of experience, such a huge, we're directors, we're all kind of stuck in our own, like we're making some version of the same, our own methodologies, our own thing, but an actor's thrust into very different environments. And yeah, it's the same building blocks, but the demands are so different.
Yeah. Plus you guys, I guess, you know, you're in pre-production, then you're shooting, then you're in post-production.
It's a long process.
Longer
For an
journey.
actor's like, okay, I'm here
I'm
for
seeing,
I start next week on something else.
Did you fix that film?
Yeah. But then actors also have the out. You get a bunch of actors together. What do they talk about? Oh, I did this shitty film 5 years ago that they can. But directors, you kind of have to own it. It's like, well, I put so much time into it. You know, you can't. I don't dislike anything just because, you know. But actors can be kind of glib about their experiences. Let's say it's frightening to hear how they talk about films behind our backs. Anyway, well, I think there's a little clock here that tells us how long this thing is. It's run down to 0. So I think we're done here. Well, you guys have a great rest of your festival here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Terry. Go see some